the Allegory of the Cave comes from a much larger book. You can see on my podium thing right here, I guess my cart thing right here, the very bottom book, it's Plato's Republic. This comes from that book. So the book itself is pretty big. This is only a few pages from that book. So it's not a standalone text, it's not its own story. It's part of a much larger argument that he's making. And the question he's investigating here is, how do we know the things that we know? So we should already know the answer to that, which is that we've experienced everything that we know because we've encountered it in the intellectual world, the spiritual world. So therefore, the process of learning is the process of reminding people what they already know. The Allegory of the Cave is a way of illustrating this. So it's a demonstration. So he begins. Socrates is speaking with his friend Glaucon. And Glaucon, by the way, is Plato's uncle. So he's related to Plato. And now, okay, so you'll play the part of Glaucon. I, of course, will play the role of Socrates, the wise philosopher. And now, let me give you an example so we can see how enlightened or unenlightened we really are. So, right off the bat, let's see how we know what we know. What does the word enlightened mean? If we say a person is enlightened.
They've come to realization.
They've come to realization, yeah. What's that?
So knowledgeable.
Yeah, knowledgeable, yeah. So we've come to a realization. We're knowledgeable about something. So let's see how we know what it is that we know. And also exactly how enlightened we really are. Notice there's a word in the middle of that word.
Light.
Light, exactly. So we understand that light is a metaphor for knowledge. When you're in the dark, what do you know? What do you see when you're in the dark? Obviously nothing. But when you're in the light, what do you see? Everything, yeah. That's why you see me, I walked in the hallway. If you guys ever see me, I have my flashlight. I'm always walking in the hallway looking for something. Do you guys know what I'm looking for?
Everything.
An honest person, yeah, an honest man. I was asked that by one of the APs a few weeks ago. Why are you walking with your flashlight? I said, I'm looking for an honest person. She's like, I hope you find one. I said, me too. I'm still looking. So the idea is that light has a way of exposing the truth. So light is itself a metaphor for knowledge. What's the greatest source of light, by the way?
The sun.
The sun. Excellent. I think that's going to come in handy later. Imagine, he says, imagine human beings living in a cave. The cave has a mouth open towards the light, and the light reaches all along the cave. These people have been in the cave since birth and have their legs and necks chained so they cannot move. Sorry. They can only see in front of them because of the chains. They can't even turn their heads around. They've been forced since birth to always stare forward. Above and behind them, there's a fire blazing at a distance, and between the fire and the prisoners, there's a low wall, like the screen which marionette players have in front of them, over which they show puppets.
I see.
Okay, so let's see what illustration somebody made. See if it works. Oh, that's much better. That's much better than I had. Okay, good. All right, so we have a person here who's chained. Their necks are chained, their legs are chained, so they can't move. They've been like this since birth. So they've never been able to turn their head around. They've never been able to see anything. They've only ever been able to see what's right in front of them. Now, it described that there's a low wall behind them, and then they have like these little figurines, like marionettes, which are puppets, which play right here. And then behind them is a fire. So because the fire's here, because you have these little puppet figures here, what does this person see on the wall over here? Shadows, yeah. And the shadows of what specifically?
Fire. Puppets.
Yeah, the puppets, exactly. So they see the fire of the puppet. Now, since this person's never been able to turn their head around and see the actual puppet itself, they believe that this is a real puppet. Of course they do. They don't have any other frame of reference. They only have access to what they've seen their whole lives. It's not quite, it doesn't have definition. It's just one color. It's nowhere near being the real thing itself. So far, so good. Okay. Now, imagine men walking back and forth behind the wall carrying sorts of vessels and statues and figurines of animals made of wood and stone and various materials which appear over the wall. Some of the passing men are talking while others are silent.
Oh, sorry. This is a strange image, and they are strange prisoners.
You'll see these prisoners are just like us. So these prisoners represent who?
Us.
Us, yeah. Us who are living in this physical world. These prisoners see only their own shadows, or the shadows of one another, which the fire throws on the wall of the cave.
Of course. How could they see anything but the shadows if they were never allowed to move their heads?
Of the objects which are being carried around in front of the fire, they would only see the shadows, right?
Certainly.
And if the prisoners were able to talk with each other, wouldn't they believe that they were talking about what was actually in front of them? About the shadows being projected onto the wall?
It would have to.
Yeah. So we have this kind of like image of a bunch of prisoners who are all chained up. And they can talk to each other, but they can't turn and look at each other. So because they can talk to each other, they can have conversations. And what do they talk about? Well, the things that they see over here against the wall. Oh, look. What's this guy's name right here? He needs a name. Jesus. All right. So we have, what's that?
I said Joe.
Jesus Joe. That's his name. Jesus Joe. So when this particular puppet shows up, and then the fire casts the image on the wall, they see the shadow, and they'll go, oh look, it's Jesus Joe. How you doing, Jesus Joe? How you been? And then back here you've got people with puppets and all that, and then they're talking to each other. So if they're chained up and they're staring at the wall, where do they think those voices are coming from? Yeah, from the wall, yeah. The shadow of the puppet on the wall. So they think that this thing is talking. They think that this thing is really alive. And they have no reason to believe that this thing is any different from themselves because they also see their own shadows on the wall. So they can interact with each other this way. And suppose further, Socrates says, that the person had an echo which came from the other side. Wouldn't the prisoners believe that when one of the passersby spoke, that the voice they heard came from the shadows on the wall? So wouldn't they
By Zeus.
Yeah. By the way, I need friends like Glaucon. I love how he answers Socrates. Certainly. Yes, of course. They would have to. Nothing else. They would certainly have to be. This guy, whatever Socrates says, you're right, Socrates. How smart you are. I need friends like that to follow me around. To them, to these folks here, the truth would be literally nothing but the shadows of the images. They would believe that the shadows were the real world. In other words, they would interact with this here and think that this is what was real, because they don't know what this is over here. They've never seen the puppets themselves. Oh, and by the way, the puppets, what are they based off of?
Like people in power.
What's that?
People in power.
Yeah, people in power, like real people, real human beings. When we make a puppet, we make it look like a person, a little bit different, but this is the idea. So even this isn't necessarily the real thing. So the shadows are imitations of the puppets. And the puppets, of course, themselves are imitations of real people. So if you remember back to Socrates' talk about the politics, that the oligarchy is an imitation of the democracy, which is itself an imitation of the aristocracy. Right. Now, imagine what will naturally follow if the prisoners are released from their chains. At first, when any of them is liberated and compelled to stand up and turn his neck around and walk towards the light, he will suffer sharp pains. Not only will his neck hurt, but the glare will hurt his eyes, and he'll be unable to see the shadows. So now we release this person, and then they turn around and they see the fire. Now imagine someone. Their neck will hurt, of course, because they've never used it before. The eyes will hurt because they've never seen light, like real light before. They'll look at the fire and they'll be kind of blinded. It hurts too much. And by the way, real quick, don't forget this. What again does light represent?
Knowledge.
Knowledge, yeah. So when someone shows you the truth, it hurts. It hurts our eyes. We have to almost turn away from it sometimes because the truth can be too much. So that's a constant recurring metaphor in the story. Now, imagine someone, a teacher, saying to this prisoner that what he has been seeing his entire life was an illusion. But now that he has been freed and is walking towards the fire, his eyes turn towards the real world. And he is now able to see things as they truly are. What do you think he'll say? Further, imagine that his teacher is pointing to the objects as they pass over the wall and requires him to name them. Won't he be confused? Will he not be able to see the shadows he formerly saw are truer than the objects his teacher is showing him now? So he's going to believe that these things over here are real, because that's what he's always known. However, he's being shown these actual real puppets, and he's being told, look, those things over there, well, he's being told, he's being shown that the shadows on the wall are based off of those puppets. But think about how the person's going to respond to this. Sorry, I can go ahead.
Far truer.
And if he is forced to look straight at the light, will he not have a pain in his eyes which will make him turn away, back to the objects that are easier for him to see, such as the shadows, and will be easier to look at than the objects at which his teacher wanted him to look?
True.
Yeah, so now, we got a choice. I told you during the quote, today was going to be a day of choices, and this is the choice that people have. You're free, you're liberated from these chains. You turn around and you see truth, you see reality, you see the fire, you see all of these things. It hurts, it makes you uncomfortable. And how does the prisoner want to respond? Turning back to the shadows. This is where I'm comfortable. I don't want to know about all this stuff over here. It's too overwhelming. I want to go back to this world over here. If any of you like the movie The Matrix, red pill or blue pill, your choice, same idea. You have the ability to confront the reality that you've been confronted with and face it courageously, or to turn back to the world that you're comfortable with. Whatever. This is your choice, but it's truth that all of you are going to have to wrestle with. If you haven't wrestled with it a dozen times in your life already, you certainly will have to wrestle with it many times. Some of you guys, when you go off, well, I'll say some things at the end, never mind. And imagine once more that he is reluctantly dragged. So now he's being dragged out of the cave. Reluctantly. He's not going willingly. He is reluctantly dragged up a steep ascent and is forced into the presence of the sun. Is he not likely to be angry, irritated, and won't his eyes hurt even more? When he gets closer and closer to the light, he will not be able to see anything outside of the cave. Why can't he see anything outside the cave?
It's too bright.
It's too bright, yeah. It's just like if I turn off all the lights in here, and then you walk outside, it's going to be too bright. You're going to have to kind of like squint your eyes and shield them a little bit. So he's being dragged out of the cave and being forced into the presence of truth, presence of the sun. He's angry. He's irritated. I know what this is like. People get pissed off at you when you tell them the truth. And his eyes will hurt even more. But as he gets closer and closer to truth, he won't be able to see anything outside the cave. He's too blinded by truth.
Not immediately. He would need to get used to the light.
Exactly. His eyes would need to adjust to the sight of the world outside the cave. First, he'll see the shadows best, the shadows of the trees, buildings, and so on. Next, he'll be able to see the reflection of the objects on the waters. Then, he'll be able to look at the objects themselves. Finally, he'll be able to gaze upon the light of the moon and the stars and the heavens. Won't he be able to see the sky and stars by night better than the sun or the light of the sun by day?
Certainly.
Yeah, so as he's dragged out of the cave, he can't look up at the sun. It's too bright. He can't even look up at the sky. It's too bright. So he has to look down, and he'll see the shadows. So that will be like, okay, a little bit of comfort. But then he's going to start to reason about it. He's going to reason that the shadows are just reflections of real things. His shadow is a reflection of him. Like you might hear me say sometimes, like here's a picture of Nietzsche. Well, it's not Nietzsche. It's a picture of Nietzsche. We understand that a picture is an imitation. It's not the real thing. So he can look down, he can remember, he can see the shadows, which makes him a little bit more comfortable, but now he's aware of a world that's all around him. Eventually he'll be able to look at the reflection on the water of himself, and he'll be able to look at the reflection of the trees in the water, whatever. And then eventually, when the sun goes down, he'll be able to look at the moon, because it's not incredibly bright. He'll be able to look at the stars. And then eventually when the sun comes up, maybe he'll be able to actually look at the sun. Maybe. So he'll be able to see the sun as it truly is. Last of all, he'll be able to see the sun. And not mere reflections of the sun in the water, but rather he will see the sun in its proper place and will contemplate the sun as it truly is.
Certainly.
Won't the former prisoner then reason that the sun is what's responsible for the season and the years, and that it is the guardian of all that is in the visible world, and in a certain way, the cause of all things which he and his friends in the cave have been looking at all these years?
Clearly, he would first see the sun and then reason about him.
Yeah. And that's an important thing there. So using reason. Remember, Socrates believes that all knowledge comes from the mind, not from your five senses. Your five senses are easily deceived. But your mind, if properly trained, is able to perceive actual real truth. So once you're able to do that, now you can reason about things. So wait a second. So the shadows are an imitation of these puppets, and these puppets are an imitation of humans. Okay. So then the fire is an imitation of what? The sun, yeah. And now you start to see that everything on this world here is an imitation of something else, and something that has a pure form. The sun is the pure form of light and enlightenment. So now we can start to reason about it. And we're going to see here that he's going to reason about things far beyond just, oh wow, it's a big ball of fire up in the sky. When he remembered, he realizes that the sun is the thing that gives light to everything. He's going to understand that the sun is the thing that's responsible for the seasons. He won't even have to just, be told that he can observe it with his mind. It'll make sense to him. And when he remembered his old home, in the cave, and how his fellow prisoners were still chained up in there, don't you think he'd be happy for himself because he learned the truth? And pity them because they were still staring at the shadows, erroneously believing that they represented the real world?
Certainly, he would.
Yeah, so now he's sitting there thinking like, wow, this is wonderful. I've learned so much. Now I'm learning the truth of the world. You have all those friends, though, back in the cave. Those poor guys. They're living in that cave, not realizing that they're not seeing reality as it truly is. And if the prisoners had contests among themselves to see who were quickest to observe the passing shadows and to name which of them was on the wall and which came after and which would come next and who were therefore best able to predict the future, do you think the former prisoner would care about winning the contest? Or do you think he would agree with the poet Homer, who wrote, "Better to be the poor servant of a poor master and suffer, rather than think and live like them"?
Yes, I think that he would rather endure anything rather than base his life on something he knows isn't true.
Yeah. I guess I would ask Glocken there. Do you think so? I wonder how many of us would. Would we rather endure anything and know the truth, or would we rather base our life on something that we know isn't true, if it's more comfortable? So now the idea is, it's not just a marionette, so you got these puppets, sure, but then also once in a while you see a marker pass by, you'll see a flashlight pass by, you'll see a rose pass by, and you won't, and then the prisoners who are in there, again, they're only seeing the shadows, they're going to have a competition to see who can name it first. So this goes by and someone goes, flashlight, oh, you got that one. Next one goes by, boom, rose, oh, it's a rose, oh man, you got that one. And they're having these competitions among themselves to see who can name the objects fastest. Are you impressed by this? Hopefully not. Now, if you're living in this world right here, well, yeah, you're impressed by that. Why? Because shadow rules everything, right? In other words, once you're outside the cave, you realize that this is all just garbage, man. It's like, yeah, if you're there, it's important to you. But when you're no longer there, other things become more important to you. Like the world as it really is. The important things of the world. You know? It's like one of the reasons for studying philosophy, of course, is that you can do things without being commanded, what other people only do when they're commanded. But there's something more than just that. You get caught up on the important things of life. And what's important you'll have to figure out for yourself. But you'll start to realize that so many things it's just so stupid. Like we fight over like how much pigment you have in your skin. You think of anything that's stupider than arguing over stuff like that. Think about some of the stuff that we fight over. And you just sit there and shake your head and it's just like, really? Like we're fighting over that? Like you realize that there are way bigger issues over here than like what color your skin is, right? No, but that's really important. Okay, shadow people. But that's not really important. Because what's here is just an imitation of something that's much deeper in you. All those other silly things, you start to figure out what's silly and what's not, what's useful and what's not. And all of that really stupid, silly shit just starts to go away. The problem that you're going to find, though, is that as all of that unimportant stuff goes away, if you're surrounded by people who do think it's important, you're not going to fit in with them anymore. Because you're now spiritually minded. Your mind is not here staring at shadows. Your mind instead is contemplating not even just the marionettes, but contemplating people. Not even just contemplating the fire, but you're contemplating enlightenment itself. You're going to be so far removed from the people who are so focused on the stupid shadow stuff that you're just not going to feel like you fit in. Socrates continues, imagine once more that the former prisoner is put back into the cave. Wouldn't he have difficulty seeing in the darkness because his eyes were acclimated to the light?
To be sure, he got used to the light, and now it would be difficult to see in the darkness.
And if someone entered him into that contest before his eyes readjusted to the darkness, wouldn't he look like an idiot because he couldn't name the images on the wall? People would say that he went out of the cave, but that he came back without his eyes. Wouldn't they say it was better to not even think of going out of the cave? Wouldn't they believe it was better to stay inside? And if the teacher tried to unchain another prisoner and lead him up into the light, wouldn't they accuse him of trying to ruin their life and even try to kill the teacher?
Sorry. No question.
Let me explain this allegory, my friend. The cave is the world that we see and experience. This is the physical world. The light of the fire is the sun. The journey upwards out of the cave is the journey of the soul into the intellectual world, where you can find true knowledge. I believe that in our world, the idea of goodness appears last of all, and is seen only with an effort. And when we do see it, we realize that it is the universal author of all things beautiful and right. We then realize that goodness is the parent of light and the Lord of light in this visible world, and the immediate source of reason and truth in the intellectual world, and that this is the power upon which he who would act rationally, either in public or private life, must focus his efforts. So now this person goes back into the cave. That person is now trying to participate in that contest. And the people are like, oh, marker, flashlight, rose. He won't be able to recognize the shadows anymore. He's going to do badly at it. And the people who are down here in the cave are going to make fun of him. They're going to say, you didn't recognize Jesus Joe. What the hell is wrong with you? You went out of, whatever you call it, out of a cave, and then you come back and you came back stupid. You know what? If anybody ever tries to unchain me, I'm going to kill them. Because what they're taking me away from is the ability to participate in this world down here, this shadow world. And you find this. You find this. People who, when you speak truth to them, they don't want it. They want to live in this shadow world. And that's fine, if that's what they want. If you really care about this person, if you really love this person, you're going to want them to get the truth. And you may even love them so much that you're willing to sacrifice your relationship with them so that the truth comes out. If you love truth more than your friends, which maybe for some people. But you'll notice that now the people who are inside the cave reject it. And they kind of say, if anybody comes along and unchains me, I'm going to kill him. Yeah, it's better for us to not be taken out of this cave. So, question?